Welcome back to Balancing Chaos with
Kelley
and Gretchen. And we work in higher ed, and we are currently in the thick of the end of the semester and commencement and graduation season and all of that. So this week we thought we would talk about jobs and careers and all of that kind of stuff. So Kelley's question to answer is,
if you could do anything and money wasn't an option, an alternative career from what you're doing right now, what would it be?
And I said Cheeto tester, but that's probably not a healthy career. So I would say if I could do anything, I would be a writer on a comedy show. 100%.
You could do that. You should do that.
I would do like Saturday Night Live or Seth Meyers. I would love to be a comedy writer. That would be my number one dream job.
Oh my gosh, why don't you shoot for that? I think you could do that.
Because it's all in New York City, and I'm not going to live in New York City. Speaking of, I know we sound a little Mayberry-ish about Bangor, but I saw this on my way over here. There was, and I am not making this up, a kid who is obviously just getting out of school on his bike with 2 fishing poles, and he was riding his bike down to the stream to go fishing. And I saw that, and I thought, our podcast listeners are going to think that's made up. But it is not. So somewhere down on the stream is a 12-year-old boy who is fishing because school just got out and it's a beautiful day. That's like a postcard, isn't it?
That is
down near where
what
the
it
eagle
means
is
to live in Maine.
Yes, exactly.
In Bangor, Maine.
So anyway, I would have to live in New York City or LA or something, and I don't necessarily want to live there, but that would be if I could helicopter in and out every day, sure.
Well, I had to drop Cameron off. I walked Cameron to school this morning, but I got there very much earlier than the teachers are waiting outside. But there were a bunch of parents, and so I walked over and I said, I have to go. Is it okay if I leave him here? And they all said, yes, sure. And I walked away, and I thought, I love that.
Yes, exactly.
Because I knew someone would be there.
Right, exactly. Anyway, so what would you do if you could do anything?
Well, I have 2.
Okay.
So it's a tough competition, although one outweighs the other. So I'll give you my second choice first. I would be a news anchor. I think it'd be so fun. Or maybe a talk show host.
Talk show host.
Yeah.
Yes.
But I need someone to come up with all the topics and get the people.
Because we're clearly doing such a bad job with it. We have so many cool guests lined up.
No, I think we do have good guests lined up, but it's not our top priority.
Right.
If this was my only job,
imagine what we'd be doing.
Oh my gosh, it would be
We'd have the best jokes. We'd have the best guests.
We would. Because, producers, they do a lot for people.
Oh, yeah. And Kelley knows because she knows Oprah.
Exactly. So then my top one is, and I'm going to do this someday, I'm going to be a hairdresser.
Oh, my children have benefited from this dream.
Mm-hmm. And I want to open a curly hair salon. We just specialize in curls. And everyone's very friendly, and they get a lot of continuing education. They fully embrace curls. We have all the products at the salon for curly hair. We do, how they have paint and sips?
Right.
We would do curl and sips for styling techniques on how to work with the different type variety of curls. I'd sell the hats, the winter hats. They're called slaps, satin lined hats.
Oh yeah.
For curly girls. Everything would be curl centric.
Nice.
Yes.
I need to make an appointment for my hair for my summer cut.
Ditto.
Pretty soon.
I need a haircut badly. But it's because my problem is, even though we have the diva stylists here, they're fine, but most of them don't even have curly hair. So they're only, I think, scratching the surface of what they could be doing. They don't use the diva fuser, which bothers me. They don't use the towel. They don't use the clips.
Do you have a female OBGYN?
Yes.
So it's the same kind of thing.
Yeah. Yeah, it bothers me.
Yes. That'd be great.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. As another, because we both have curly hair, so we often share our product raves and recommendations and all of that. And we're getting into the good season where my hair really likes the humidity.
So does mine.
So it'll be looking good. So the other thing is that we have the great privilege of working with young adults in our careers that we have now that exist. And having been professionals for a while, me longer than you, because I'm old.
You are. How old are you again?
117.
Are we allowed to say on this podcast?
I'll be 43 in July.
You're not even old. That's not even old.
But I'm older than you.
Not that much.
I remember phones that had cords.
I had that. I remember a time where I didn't have call waiting, but I didn't have the party line.
Yeah, I had that. So we thought we would share some sort of resources and ideas and things like that for people who are, for new grads or people who are job hunting, and resources like that. So if you can't be a comedy writer or a talk show host or own your own curly hair salon, but if you want to do any of those things, talk to us, because we'll tell you what we wish we could do. What is some advice that you would give to your students? I can tell you what advice I give to my students who are generally entering the field of teaching. And I tell them that the first thing they have to do is start their own retirement account with their first job, even if it seems like they're not getting paid that much. And that's partly because of living in Maine. Teachers are not part of the Social Security system. And so it leads to all kinds of...
You're not?
No.
Wow, I had no idea.
Because it leads to all kinds of different issues and can be expensive later on in life, and you don't get survivor benefits and all that kind of stuff. So my advice that I tell them right up is start the 401k or 403b or whatever, or an IRA or whatever it is. Usually schools will have an option to pull your money out pre-tax, and start that account now while you're young. So that's my practical advice for when they get a job.
Can I just say that I think there's some misconception between Republicans and Democrats, probably not misconception between the two, but misconceptions of Republicans about Democrats, that you're not concerned with saving for college. I think there's this myth narrative out there that believes that Democrats just want the government to take care of everything, and that they don't have any concern about
self-sufficiency.
Yeah, exactly. And responsible things like retirement.
Right. And that is absolutely a myth. I would say, as a eventually to be registered Democrat, I'm still an independent. I mean, we have retirement savings, and we don't save a lot for college, but honestly, it's because I work in higher ed. And so there's some perks with that. If I ever stopped working in higher ed, then that would become a much bigger priority, but I'm still paying off my own college education. So that's why it's nice to work in higher ed. I think that the idea is that you help those who need the help. There's, making sure not that everyone has a lot, but that the least have what they need.
Right. Social justice, that people deserve the basic human rights.
Right.
Housing, healthcare, education.
So I have retirement accounts, and I've had them for as long as Dave has retirement accounts that he's had for as long as he's worked, and not many people. And so here's coming back. So yes, I'm 42, and I'm always surprised when I hear about peers that say, I'll do that later, because the best compound interest is such a fun thing to do. I always worry when I hear, that's kind of like when we talked to Jamie about life insurance and stuff. If you put the money away, it's gone. I'm still working on paying down my student loans. I'm very good at saving money that I can't touch, and so then I end up having more of my money going into those types of accounts than into my checking account to pay off the balance of my student loan or whatever. But
yes,
the interest works out.
I usually, along the financial advice, I will encourage students to pay off their student loans as quickly as possible, especially because in nursing, most new grads will start on a night shift, and the pay differential is usually quite significant. Sometimes it can be up to $10,000 or $12,000 extra per year to work nights. But what can happen is you have no experience working the night shift, and you don't often realize what kind of toll it will take on your body physically and emotionally. So then they'll hate the night shift because of this havoc that it's wreaked on their lives. But then they can't switch to the day shift because the pay cut is so substantial. So they're kind of trapped. So I always suggest that they live on the salary that is the equivalent of the day shift and take the night shift differential to pay down their loans.
Right.
Because a lot of people, I mean, the number one reason that I'll get for people to say they won't go into academia or they won't teach or they won't work in community-based nursing, even though they really want to, is because of finances, too many bills. And so I think one of the big dangers of a new grad is to upscale their life to that salary, because once they do that, they're trapped. And many, many, many of them don't want to work at the hospital forever, but they have no mobility because of their financial.
Or they go out and they get their first job, so they go buy a new car.
Yeah, exactly.
And, start adding to their expenses.
Or a house that they're really stretched to afford to that salary. And not only in the night shift, but and also the hospital salaries on top of that are usually much higher. So then they can't do what they really love because of finances. And I think that's what cripples the profession, is when people aren't in a specialty that they really truly are passionate about and love. They're in a specialty because of money, and which is not the best.
Another piece of advice, when do nurses do resumes?
Yes.
Mm-hmm. I always tell people to have somebody else read your resume.
Definitely.
Even if you think it's perfect, have a second set of eyes on it, because you get too buried in it and you get too up in your head when you're working on, perfecting your resume, that you might miss something. I know that I looked at somebody's resume and cover letter that had the wrong year listed on the cover letter date, and just they had spent so much time focusing on the cover letter they didn't look at the date, and they had typoed the year and the date. So they fixed that and it was fine. It was taken care of. You'll hear people talk about, oh, I got this great resume, great cover letter that started off saying, I'm so excited to work at Smoothie Juniors. And then halfway down it says, oh, I really think that the best place for me to work would be Smoothie Mart. And they have not gone through and checked to update their cover letter to match where they're applying to. So always have somebody else read your resume, read your cover letter. And another service, if you're a college grad, use your career services office. They are there for you through school and after school, and they are total nerds about this stuff, and they will absolutely sit down and go over your resume, your cover letter, give you advice. We have at our school, we have a career connection bank that there are certain employers that will place their ads with us first to get into the alumni network or to get into the student network, because they've had close relationships with whoever, or they're alumni themselves. So visit your campus, your career services office, call them, email them. They're great.
I would say this is true even for non-new grads, because I sit on a lot of search committees, and I mean, it's typically very highly educated people who are applying for jobs, and they make that very same mistake that you just said. The cover letter will say, Dear X, but then down in the letter, it will reference another place. So it's not just new grads who make that mistake. And the other thing is that definitely have someone review your stuff, but then also be open to feedback. Because so often you give feedback and then people think, I don't know what they think, that you're crazy or that you're being vindictive or whatever it is. And a lot of times they won't take feedback, which is just silly.
And that's kind of part of going into the workforce anyways, that you have to learn how to take feedback. The other thing that I would say, so I'm going to reference Ask a Manager a ton in this episode because I love it. It's a blog, and she actually did an open thread fairly recently about what's the strangest thing you've seen on a resume. And it was a riot. Like, some of the things that people put on there when they're actually applying for real jobs are kind of amazing. So it's a great, Ask a Manager is just such a good resource to get ideas. She actually has a new book out that came out not last week. And so it's a brand new book, and her name is Allison Green. But her Ask a Manager, she has a new podcast too, but her book and her blog are really interesting. And I feel like I've learned so much about fields I don't even know about, or thought of, seen stories of things I could never have comprehended. But it's a great resource. I bought the book for a friend when she was job hunting, and it has some great examples on how to write your cover letter to stand out but not be obnoxious. Basically, it worked for my friend. I
think it's really hard sometimes to talk favorably about yourself. And so I think a lot of times what happens is people underestimate
I
what
can't even
they've
get
done.
you to say doctor.
I know. Yeah, but I told you why I don't like to do that. There's so many reasons.
We're going to call it Dr. Curls. The curl
Yes,
doctor.
yeah, I've already thought about that before.
There you
That'd
go.
be good, wouldn't it?
Yes.
So the other thing is with the resume and the cover letter is networking, because so often I'll hear two things happen. I do a lot of reference check. Provide reference for a lot of people, and they often won't tell me that they applied for a job and they use me as a reference. And usually I'm fine with it, but I can provide a much better reference if people warn me, because I can say, oh, please send me your resume. What have you accomplished? Like, what have you been doing in the past 6 months? But a lot of times I just get these blind reference calls, and we have so many students. Sometimes it's hard to even remember.
I would bet that you're also the kind of instructor that makes everybody feel that they're remembered and makes them feel special. And so then
You're
it's
calling
hard
me out
when-
right now?
Well, no, but I mean, I think I'm sort of the same, but then, 3 years go by
Right.
and
Even 2 semesters.
yeah. And you were like, okay, all right. And unless
Right.
it was a real problem,
Exactly.
it's hard to remember. And especially when, I mean, you probably have 95% female students.
Mm-hmm. And they all kind of look the same. When you're talking about certain demographics and age groups.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I think it just to give someone a heads up is really wise. And the other thing, too, is to use your resources, because I've had students and new grads apply for certain positions where I know I am good friends with the hiring manager, but they won't tell me. So
Right.
in some of these really competitive positions, when you have outstanding, when you know them very well, and you could have a outstanding influence. They're an outstanding candidate, and you could have such an influence on the decision, but then they don't even tell you.
Right.
Because I think the stats, something like 98% of jobs are obtained because you knew somebody within the organization. We'll have to fact check that.
Well, we're going to have to fact check that for sure.
But it's really
a high
high.
number.
It's really high. Maybe not 98%, but it's really it's very unusual that you're going to apply to the job where you know nobody at all, blindly, and you get the job. Because it's often an internal candidate, someone who knows someone, a friend of a friend, who are going to sneak ahead of you.
So you've applied and you have a phone interview. If you have a phone interview or a video interview, if a video interview especially, dress up like you were going to a real interview, and including your pants, because you never know if you're going to have to jump up and you want to be wearing pants. So top to bottom, get ready like you're going to a real face-to-face interview. Also, check your background. I've heard stories of people who are doing a video interview and the background is just a table strewn with empties, like empty wine bottles and beer bottles and stuff. And they were like, oh, well, that was an interesting insight into that person's personal life. But look around, test your settings before, look at your background. What are they going to see? Are they going to see college movie posters? Just take them down. Put a plant. I'm thinking of like Doctors on Demand. I was like, that has to be in her house, because it's like, here's a plant and a bookshelf with 3 books on it, and that's all that is in this room. I'm like, yeah, you have all your laundry just at a site, I'm sure. But check your background for a video interview. Check
And your lighting.
Your lighting. Yeah. Even if you get a table lamp with like a daylight bulb in it, if you put that and put it behind your computer screen and kind of angle your lighting, it's going to make a huge difference. If you have to use a headset and a microphone, sometimes that helps. If you're in a place, like if you were living in an apartment or a situation where it's not quiet around you, maybe you have roommates, or maybe they're doing construction on the street, get a headset and a microphone, and and if anyone kind of looks at you askance, just say, oh, hope you don't mind, I've got my headset on because there's construction going on outside of my apartment. But I'm really excited to have this conversation. I think that's important. And the other one too is to don't be afraid to ask the question back and to ask for clarification. I think that's something that needs to happen more, or to take notes, take a notebook and pen it. Nobody's going to look at you weird if you come in with your own kind of notebook, maybe an extra copy of your resume to say, oh, this is for like the in-person interview. You go in your meeting with a panel of people. have backup copies of your resume and just say, oh, I brought extra copies if anyone would like to see it if you haven't seen it yet.
Yes, and along those lines, you should always do multiple rehearsals of your interview with a colleague, or go to a career center, or if you know someone who's in human resources. I actually wrote a paper about this a couple years ago. I collected common interview questions and concerns among hiring managers in nursing, and it was really interesting because students were asking, how do I prepare? And I was just giving them my own suggestions, but I thought, I'll just ask. I'm going to put this out to some hiring managers and do, like a mini study on what is important and what are they seeing as challenges. When I put the call out, I got an overwhelming response because hiring managers were saying how unprepared people come to interviews. They can't answer basic questions. They come dressed very inappropriately. They were saying that they come with their sunglasses on their head with the Dunkin' Donuts coffee. They don't like that. How you're sitting, even waiting in the waiting room, can have a major influence on their decision to hire you or not. I think it's something like 40 seconds. That's how long it takes for a person to decide if they'd hire you or not. So just simply the way you look, which we hate to say, don't judge a book by its cover, but in an interview, it can really be that way. And so when I wrote this paper on these sample questions, I used to give it to students to practice, and they would feel so much better because they're not always the exact same question. But if you have something planned, more likely than not, you're going to get asked questions like, what are your strengths and weakness? Tell me. And the hiring managers in the study that I'd done, they really wanted specific examples because they don't want politician answers about whatever it is. I mean, this is true for any field. In nursing, if you say, oh, patient-centered care, this is the buzzword now, you could regurgitate that back. I provide patient-centered care. Well, it means nothing if you can't link examples to it and demonstrate that you actually even know what that means,
right,
and how you are doing it or not. And I know my friend who works in HR, she agrees with this statement about practicing interviews, and she does mock interviews, for our friends if they want to practice interview questions. So this is not true for just new grads. I mean, you must have been in interviews where it's so clear they weren't prepared.
You should be prepared, but you also shouldn't be afraid to ask for clarification.
Yeah.
Or ask, oh, well, that's unusual. And, in my last position, I didn't have those responsibilities, but it sounds like have an answer. And even if you need to take a minute to think about it, I think it's better to take a minute and give a thoughtful answer than to just say, my greatest weakness is that I'm so good, I try to do it all.
Right.
Don't say that.
Yeah.
My greatest weakness is that I love work.
Right.
And being here is the only thing I ever want to do. No, that's BS. We know it. So there's that. The other, and I think the idea that as soon as you arrive to that workplace, that you are being interviewed. There was actually a great, I think it was on, this might have been Ask a Manager as well. I think it was, where this guy was riding the subway. I'm going to paraphrase, but I'll find the story. Was riding the subway to a job interview and ran into this woman, or knocked over her bag, or she ran into him, and he swore at her. It's like, and went off on her, and then gets to the interview, and who's the person interviewing him?
Right.
But this woman that he just swore at on the subway, and guess who didn't get the job? And I remember, even when I worked in retail a million years ago, I remember thinking, like, I can't lose my shit at you for being so stupid, because someday you might be hiring me for something else. Mm-hmm. That's generally good advice. So your whole way there, when you pull into the parking lot, don't take up 3 spaces and ding everyone's door. You never know who's watching you in that moment.
So I don't know if I've ever confessed on this podcast that James has the worst road rage ever.
I don't know if you have or not.
Oh my gosh. It is embarrassing, his road rage. And this is what I always say to him when he's in a rage. James, I might know this person. You might know this person. Just keep it together. Take a deep breath. And it's so true. It hasn't happened yet, but oh my gosh. Yeah, we've been in altercations before in Massachusetts where this one guy took his parking spot And so James pulled up behind him. The guy got out of the car and he comes toward our car and I'm, I don't know, 5 months pregnant and I'm hiding. I'm slouching down in the seat like, we're going to die today. This guy's going to shoot us. You know, because I was really paranoid, and especially leaving Bangor, Maine to Massachusetts. And anyway, the guy comes over and he said, "What's your problem?" And James leans out of the car and he goes, "My problem is you stole my parking spot." I don't know why he cares so much. Do you have road rage?
No, not like that. I tend to
People either do or they don't.
My road rage will be, okay, obviously there's something going on in your life right now that you are not paying attention to the people around you. So maybe you are racing to get to your dying grandmother's side, or maybe you just got an organ transplant text message that you need to get there quick because they have a lung for you. I don't know why it is that you're acting like this, but I'm just going to stand back. It's going to be cool. It's going to be fine.
I think my road rage approach is I don't notice it at all. Someone could be going 20 in a 40. I honestly just keep on driving.
I never noticed how pretty this town was before.
Honestly, it's pretty. Although when we lived in Massachusetts, I did develop a road rage to the point where I showed up one time and this woman was parked in the middle of a 5-way intersection on her cell phone. And so she was blocking traffic in every direction because she got caught in the light. And I was so mad at her. And so I was beeping. And then she got mad at me and she gave me the bird. And then I gave her the bird. And
then the two birds flew off together.
So I showed up to where I was going, my destination, and I was so worked up. My heart rate must have been 120. I was like, I just gave someone the bird in the car. And everyone there is from Boston. So they were all like, oh my gosh, we can't take her out of the compound. I actually honked
at someone a couple of weeks ago. I honked at someone and the girl's like, oh, what was that? But it was somebody, we were at the light turned green. They were buried in their phone. And I usually give it like a beat, another beat. Okay, everyone, the cars on next to you are moving and you're not noticing. And so I beeped and then they started beeping back like, oh man, I'm like, you're the one who didn't notice it was green.
Right.
I didn't want it. And it was like one of those lights that takes forever, you know? I didn't want to get stuck here for the rest of my life. So.
Well, someone did this to us in a FedEx truck the other day. He didn't go. And so we gave it a beep beep. And then James gave him a toot toot. And then he got really mad and started beeping back at us, even though he was in front of us. Then he cruises down to the next light and he leans out of his car, starts flipping us off. Then he pulls over as we're driving by and starts screaming obscenities at us. And we were like, you didn't go. I don't understand how this is our problem. I almost called the number on the back of his FedEx truck, but I decided it wasn't worth it. But it was really wild. I've never experienced it. It was a really severe road rage.
So always be.
Yes.
Don't road rage your way.
Don't road rage.
And if it's someplace that's local to you, figure out your route and how to get there and figure out where the parking is.
Yes.
And figure out how long it will take you to get there because so we work on college campuses. Right now, my semester is over, so parking is abundant. You can park easily. But if you have an interview at 10 a.m. on a Wednesday during the semester, you are going to be looking for parking. And so you don't want
half a mile walk.
Oh yeah, you don't want to pull in at 9:55 because you will be late to your interview. Now, I'm also one of those people that is always early. I don't like being late, but it's pick out your route, figure out the parking. Particularly if you're going to a college campus, get that information beforehand. Some campuses are really strict on the ticket system. Some aren't. In that one, if you need a parking pass, usually your hiring committee will tell you that you need a parking pass. But if it's summer, you're probably okay.
But I would say it's not just campuses. The hospitals now are just as, if not bigger than college campuses. Every time I go to our local hospital, I have to get one of the escorts because they have these people now in the front who will.
You have to get an escort?
Yeah. Well, I mean, they don't. Well, Gretchen. This isn't Saturday Night Live.
Sorry.
But they have helpers. They probably have better titles than that to direct you where to go. And I always have to get one because it's so big and confusing.
I'm not there very often, thankfully, so I haven't run into that. I think that the difference with campuses is that because it's such a fluctuating parking population, they don't want to build a parking lot for every student that might be there in March because it's shifting all the time. But anyway, figure out how to get there early. So then during the interview, what are some things that you would advise or that you would advise against?
Don't chew gum. Don't bring a coffee unless it was provided to you by the people at the interview. Don't text for sure.
Mm-hmm. Just turn off your phone.
Yeah, definitely. Also, I would say don't put your sunglasses on top of your head if it's summer. And then try to be positive.
The sunglasses thing would be wicked hard for me because I do it. It'll be 9:00 at night here in my own house. I'm like, oh, my sunglasses are still on the top of my head. I'm very much a glasses on the head type person. Mine is have some questions ready to ask.
Yeah, that too.
Of the committee. And sometimes if you're not sure you might have questions that come up during the interview, but if you're not, one of the things that can be good to ask is, how did you end up at Acme Industries? Or, what would you say is one of the best things about working for Acme Industries? Mm-hmm. What is the 5-year plan? Or you could ask things like that. Don't ask about pay. Don't ask about benefits and all that. That's a HR conversation, depending on how the employer handles it. Someone else might have that conversation. So the committee, in my experience, the committee has no idea what the pay is really going to be and doesn't have the details on that. And there is moves now to stop asking, when you get to that phase, to stop asking about what your previous salary was, because it's one of those things that has helped grow the wage gap, the gender wage gap, is by basing the new job salary on the employee's past salary, where they may have been totally underpaid for what it is that they do and what their real value is. So Ask a Manager, again, has some great resources on how to push back on that question without seeming like a jerk, and how to say, I think California, they're not allowed to ask it anymore. But, she's like, some people might not know that. So here's how to gently push back on it without being like, I'm not telling you that, it's against the law, because that comes off really brash. Yeah.
And the other thing is you're interviewing them as much as they're interviewing you. I see, we see some posts in the mom threads about women feeling inferior to men for certain circumstances, like they're pregnant or they're breastfeeding and they're concerned about interviews. But I would say if you feel that way about an organization, you don't want to work there. So when you ask these really specific questions, like you just gave some really good ones, what brought you to this company, or what do you love most about working here, or what's the culture, describe the culture, and they have a hard time answering, I think those are all red flags, depending on what their answers are. And it's just as important for you to like where you work as it is to have a job. Although I know it's easier for me to say because nursing is abundant with job opportunities. So we really don't have to settle. And I think that's one of the other challenges for employers of nurses is creating ideal work environments, because nurses won't settle. They don't have to. There's so many job opportunities. So if there are red flags in the interview, don't work there. Especially don't work there just because of the money either. Some organizations pay more than others, but if it's going to be a horrible environment, then it's not worth it to your health.
And sometimes, and again, this comes from my best internet friend, Ask a Manager, who doesn't know who I am. But
is it really just one person, or is it a team?
Oh yeah, no, it's one person. I don't know how she puts out this much content, except for that this many people are emailing her their crazy work stories. And the other part too is to just sort of listen to how other people talk about it and listen for red flags and look at how the hiring committee works. And if it seems like a really disorganized, scatterbrained hiring process, that might be a sign that it's a disorganized, scatterbrained organization. Listen, like I know I had a friend who had an interview with someone and who the guy raved about how his last assistant never took a sick day and was always there, and the vibe that she got was that taking a sick day would be frowned upon.
Mm-hmm.
And not that they are someone who calls in sick all the time, but sometimes you got to call in sick. And it was just, oh, no, you, of course, if you need to call in sick, that's fine. Well, yeah, it is fine because it's in our state, even it's protected by law. But it was just, yes, it's legal, but is it going to be accepted?
Right.
Are you going to be talked about like, oh, says she's sick, air quotes, you know?
Yeah, there are cultural expectations even within units, even if there are laws or policies.
And for major corporations and things like that, there's like GlassDoor where you can look and read employee reviews, which total grain of salt to take that, because you know that anybody who gets canned is going to probably go to GlassDoor and leave a horrible review, but it can be sort of give you some insight into what other companies are doing. It can be also give you insight into what other salaries are for your job title, which can be useful as well. Another great book is called Ask For It, and I am forgetting the author's name, but it's about women don't negotiate. Women are told, here is your salary, and they go, oh, okay, thanks. And so Ask For It is all about negotiating pay, negotiating raises, negotiating benefits, all of those kinds of things. And if you are a new grad and a woman, I would absolutely recommend reading that book. Some like teaching, it's unionized, and so there is no room to negotiate on salary. Teaching is you have a bachelor's degree and no experience. You start here and you'll work your way up. But for any other industry where there is some negotiation room, it's important to ask for that because it compounds over years and can make a huge difference.
Yeah, definitely. The other thing is there's another great book, 48 Days to the Job You Love. I was going to use it as my favorite thing, but since we're going for book recommendations, it's really a great book. It provides step-by-step instruction or advice about how to go after a job that you're really passionate about. And he talks about how many encounters you have to have with an organization or hiring manager to make sure that they remember your name. And it goes
without calling the cops.
Yeah, exactly. And it talks about the thank you letter afterward and being really forward and upfront about when they'll meet and schedule the interview. And I think it's a 5-touch process. And he spells out what to say in the letters and everything. And it's a fantastic book.
The other thing too to think about is to look at the jobs that when you're applying for them, Ask For It had this, I'm pretty sure, talked about how men will look at a job description and say, oh yeah, there's 10 skills needed. Mm-hmm. I've got 4. Mm-hmm. Cool. I'm applying for that. It sounds like it'd be a cool job. And women will look and say, well, there's 10 skills and I have 9, but the 10th I'm a little shaky on, so I better not apply because I don't meet their requirements. And particularly if you have shown yourself to be somebody who can learn new things, who is a lifelong learner, who can problem solve and be a critical thinker, I think that those types of people for most things could probably be taught that
anything.
10th thing.
Yeah.
And so men tend to be way more confident about their skills and women tend to play them down. And even the job that I have now that I've had for almost a dozen years, when I first read the job description, it was like that. There were 10 things and there was one in there. And I talked to some friends who did that 10th thing. And I said, I've never even, I've heard of it, and I've done other code, but I've never done this. Oh, it'll be easy. There's some good online classes. And this was like literally 12 years ago. So I applied for the job and I obviously interviewed and got it. And then you know how many times I ever was asked to do that 10th thing?
0. Yeah.
And the person who hired me, became like a work friend and all that and said, yeah, we just kind of thought it might be good to have someone else who knew how to do that just in case. And so we threw it on there. Yes. And it wasn't an essential skill because there were 10 other people who knew how to do it, but they were like, oh, maybe she could just run her own reports, or, they could run their own reports, whoever was hired. But
I cannot agree with that more. And I think this is sometimes why my world views are skewed, because I've always been an optimist. So every job I've had, except for the one I have right now, when I applied for it, I was technically not qualified. Either I didn't have the degree they wanted, or I didn't have the experience that they desired. And I just went for it anyway because I really wanted it, especially when I was trying to get into wellness, because I went into it really early in my career with worksite wellness, and I didn't have any experience. I hadn't been a nurse that long, and they wanted someone with a master's in public health, and at that time I didn't even have a master's degree, or they wanted someone who'd been a nurse a lot longer or whatever. I never worried about it. I just went for it. And see, James is much more critical. When he sees a job description, he'll analyze each line and say, "Oh no, I can't do that. Like I can't apply for that because I've never heard of this before. I don't even know what they're talking about." And I'm like, "Oh, you're fine. Just go for it."
And even with that 10th thing, when I interviewed, I had looked it up, I had researched it, and my answer to that, and I can't remember if they even asked me about it, was sort of, I am familiar with these other types of systems, but I haven't done that one specifically, but I really feel like my background in these other systems would give me a good baseline to learn this new one. And it worked.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I'm saying kind of about new grads with underestimating themselves too with the resumes, because a lot of times you'll read the resume, the first draft of the resume, and it seriously just screams, "I'm a student, I know nothing." And it's just, it's not true. Especially now, the new grads, if they're of a younger age demographic, their strength is in technology typically. Not all of them, but they're technologically savvy, and they can multitask typically, which is an asset to employers who are moving to a digital age. And then older demographics who are new graduates have that life experience with the recent education, which is a different core set of skills. And a lot of times it's better to take a person who has no experience at all and train them exactly how you want them, as opposed to taking somebody with a lot of experience and beliefs, black or white beliefs that this is how it's done. You've heard this a million times. "Oh, let's try this." No, we've always done it this way. I hate that.
It's the ham thing. I've told.
Yeah.
This is the have I told you the ham thing?
Oh, you told me in a nice meeting we had.
So the ham thing is, and this actually came from the person who hired me, who thought maybe I might need to know these reports, but it was, so the ham parable is this woman is, every year she bakes a ham for Easter, and she cuts off the end and puts it in the pan and cooks it, and every year she does this. And her husband finally says, "Why do you always cut off the end of the ham?" And she goes, "Oh, I don't know. There's some reason we do it. I can't remember. I'm going to call my mom, because that's how I learned to do it. You cut off the end of the ham, put in the pan." So she calls her mom and says, "Mom, why do we cut the end of the ham off? What's the purpose of that?" And her mom goes, "Oh, I never had a pan big enough." So so this woman in this parable is going on and keeps cutting the ham, never stopped to ask why they were doing it, and just continued on. So is this a ham thing is something that gets tossed around my office, fairly regularly. Like, okay, is this a ham thing, or is this something we really need to keep doing this way?
This was Gretchen's analogy when she became my advocate for school health.
Ham for health.
Yes.
That's going to be our slogan.
I liked it. Hey, it worked.
After the interview?
Thank you note, for sure. Handwritten, preferably. I guess email, they say, is good. I still prefer a handwritten thank you note. I don't know. I really think it makes you stand out, because I make my students write thank you notes every year to their preceptors. And honestly, it's the most difficult assignment, and it's not even an assignment, that we do all semester. And I'm not even joking you. I mean, they'll ask me, "What do I write?" And so at first, when I first would receive these responses, I'd talk to my colleague, I'd say, "They asked me what to write in a thank you note." And she said to me, "Well, Kelley, it's probably because they've never written one. People just don't do that anymore." And I go, "Oh, so now I'm a little gentler about it. So now I review a thank you note, what you should put in it, what makes a good thank you note, etc." But I do think that this happens so infrequently that when you send a handwritten thank you note, you are going to stand out.
Yep. It's soft skills.
Yeah. Everybody, that's just it.
That's what I tell my students as well, because everybody is going to leave, and both of our fields of study have licensure requirements. Mm-hmm. So everyone's going to leave. They're going to get their license. There's not going to be a lot to differentiate them from everyone else. Yes, I'm a new grad. I'm licensed. I'm certified. Let's go.
Yep.
it's the soft skills that set you apart. And soft skills are knowing how to dress and how to be professional in the interview, or sending the thank you note, or just understanding the etiquette when you're on the phone, which is, we actually, a group I worked with had nothing to do with work, but they got a complaint because the office had a new employee who was younger, who was terrible on the phone. And so parents would call and they would answer and just be like, what? Well, I'm calling to check on XYZ. Okay. Like, had no phone skills. And I said, well, honestly, how often do we use the phone? How often do kids use the phone? They don't. Do you remember like running to answer your home phone?
Yes.
My kids never answer a home phone.
Exactly.
You know, it's one of those skills that just isn't there. So having good phone etiquette is something that can be kind of important. What was the other one that I was going to say went along with the phone etiquette, but I forget.
With the soft skills. I do. I'm hearing more and more that employers would prefer strong interpersonal skills over intellectual ability.
At my school, actually,
Believe it.
Which has a very strong business department, one of the things that they do every year that they offer to graduating seniors is an etiquette dinner. And they have they put on a dinner, and students can go up there and learn which fork is for what. And the idea came from a faculty member who was a first generation college student. And the first time he went to a business dinner, he had never had salad before because he grew up very poor, and he had no idea how to eat the salad, and he knew he needed to figure it out. So now he is sort of the sponsor of this etiquette dinner, so that people who are feeling like they might not fit in to this professional world because they're first generation college students or because of their background get to learn the proper way, how to put your napkin on your lap, how to, which glass is yours, the bread plate, passing food, all of that kind of stuff that isn't taught in a class, which I think is a brilliant class. I could probably use one.
Yeah. If you get really technical with the fine dining etiquette, it's complicated.
Oh yeah.
Like the wine, smelling it. I hate that. I hate going to a fancy restaurant and ordering wine because I don't want to go through that. It's so uncomfortable to me. Then they'll hand it to you if you ordered it. Then everyone's looking at you while you take your sip.
You're like, yeah, it's the finest Franzia I've ever sniffed.
Delicious. Get this over with.
So the soft skills are writing the thank you note, and depending on, sometimes if it's a tight timeline, you can, at minimum, email the hiring manager a thank you note. And don't just say, bro, thanks, peace out, gee. But say, thank you so much. And if you have gotten a really strong vibe that you want to work there, say it in the thank you note. Like, after our interview, I'm even more excited about the opportunity to join your team. I think I'd be a great fit. Something that lets them know that you're into it. You know?
And also something that you're going to give to them, because organizations really are egocentric. They want to know what is in it for them. So reiterating what you can do for them, and this 48 days to the job you love scripts are really great. Like, this is what I could do for you. After my interview, and we talked about this, I could really help you with this. So I really can't recommend that book enough. It's a great book.
I'll have to check it out. Just because I am a super, so my dream job, money is no object, I know I could do it. If you knew you couldn't fail, what would you do job would be comedy writer. But my other plan B is I would be really good in training and development in HR.
Well, you kind of do it on the side because Gretchen.
I need to get this to be. I need to monetize my benefits help.
Gretchen convinced me to go to an HSA, which I did used to have an HSA back in the day, but my health insurance, my basic health insurance plan was so good. Really, I never took the time when an HSA became available to do the math again. So Gretchen did the math for me. I moved over to an HSA. So now I'm on an HSA. So now I am hyper vigilant of all the bills. So I get this bill because Cameron's been struggling with some ear infections. He ruptured his tympanic membrane. It's been this whole ordeal. So I had 2 visits to the primary care office 2 days apart for the same issue. And I was noticing on the bill for one of the visits, they charged me $100 more than another. So I called the office. See, I never would have done this if I just paid a copay. And I called the office and I said, this is odd. You know, one time I was charged $150, the next time I was charged $250. She said, oh, well, the second provider coded the visit for a higher acuity. And I said, okay, well, I could see the chief complaint was different because one was for the tympanic membrane rupture and one was for ear pain. But the intervention by the provider was exactly the same. They looked into the ear and prescribed an antibiotic. I don't know how you can charge me $100 more for doing the exact same thing. She goes, okay, well, we could send it to an audit. And I said, yes, please do. So then I told Gretchen. She was so excited. But that really, everyone should have an HSA because I am so mindful of spending. And then I just had a call yesterday because I had a hearing test for Cameron last month, and it's almost $300. And now they're telling me I need to have another one, because they don't see any fluid behind his ear, but he still can't hear out of it. So it's not fluid this time, so now I have to go have another one, which doesn't make any sense to me.
An HSA is almost always going to be more cost beneficial to you than paying the premiums for an HMO and copays and the max out of pocket. Yeah. I have a whole spreadsheet. I have a calculator. I can put the link to my healthcare helper, I call it, and it has a whole document and it has the calculator, and it's really pretty great.
Well, and I think that's a really important component of accepting a job, especially with multiple job offers.
Understanding the benefits.
Because a lot of times people will say, oh, well, I can't work there. You know, I get this a lot. I'm sure you do too. Oh, I can't do academia because pay's terrible. But they don't look at the comprehensive picture. Sometimes your 401k match, your health insurance costs, and your time off significantly outweigh the hourly pay at another employer that isn't giving a match at all, or their what's the deductible on the health insurance is so high.
Yes,
it's not worth it.
And that's the kind of thing that you should feel free to ask HR, because they probably have the little pamphlet that they give every new employee, mm-hmm. and just say, before I make a decision, can I please have a benefits packet to review? So what is the match? How much do they match? What is it? What do the plans look like? What are the deductibles? What are the premiums? There are so many different variables, and I love to nerd out on stuff like that. And I have helped a ton of people, both at my workplace and at other workplaces, look at their numbers and be able to figure it out, because it's just one of those things that I can just see, and I know how to decode it. But I love my HSA. So even when you're dealing with all these what look like big medical bills, it would actually, in the end, probably cost more. It would still cost more to be doing the old traditional plan. It
would. And actually, I just received a call, and it's the audit. It's the result of the audit.
Are they giving you your money back?
I don't know. It says I have to call them.
Oh.
So.
Don't you love voicemail transcription?
Yes. It's the best, because I hate voicemails. This is the new age.
So we've covered the thank you note. You get an offer. You can always take some time to consider the offer. And usually at minimum 24 hours. Sometimes you might say, can I talk it over with my family and get back to you on Monday, or don't make it an endless amount of time. But then when you have the offer, you can negotiate and say, that I would love to come work for you, but I have had 4 weeks vacation in my current place of employment. And, is there any way that we can adjust the benefits to not be the standard 2 weeks for a new employee, but to match my tenure at my current place and give me those benefits? And that kind of stuff is generally that's easier to negotiate almost sometimes, I think, more than the salary.
Well, and the other thing too that I just remembered is my sister was just going to a lot of interviews, is that when they try to schedule an interview, often there is flexibility with the scheduling of the interview. Because I don't know if you see this with students, but I see it with students and my sister. They'll call and say, we'd like to give you an interview Wednesday at 2. But let's say the students have class at that time. They think they have to skip class for the interview, but they don't. They could just say, oh, thank you so much. I'm so excited. Could we make the interview 3:30 because I have class until 3? Or you don't even really have to tell them. My sister was doing this. She was working at a job that she was interested in doing something else. So she had all these interviews set up, and they were scheduling them in her work day. So she started leaving work to go to the interviews, but it was getting a little noticeable. So she was a little stressed about it. And I said, oh, you could ask to have a different time. Just say, you're working until 4. Could we please schedule it at 4 or 8 or on your lunch break? So she did that to the first employer that offered her an interview. And they said, well, sorry, we're going to skip over you because we have so many applicants.
No.
But I told her that's very unusual.
But you know what?
You don't want to work at a place like that. At a place that would make you compromise your current job for tell them, oh, this is your only option. You don't want to work at a place like that.
Exactly. And that's exactly what it is. And then that's a bullet that is dodged.
Yeah.
The other thing, too, that I would say is that there are so many just weird jobs out there. I'm always surprised. And it's easy. You know, we're like teacher, nurse, teaching, you know. Listen, keep your ear to the ground. And most of them are not advertised in the classifieds. Most of them, you know, Indeed is a pretty good website to look at. There's other sites, but sometimes you're just going to hear about it because there's an opening at someone's company. Listen, I
love one of my favorite. You like to nerd out with HSA accounts and these sorts of things. I love looking at the job board. I look at it every single day, probably multiple times a day. And I'm very interested to see the types of jobs that are out there. If I know anyone who's looking for a job, I love helping them find a job.
Well, it's like there's one right now for a research assistant for Dartmount.
Yes.
But it's posted here.
In Bangor. Yes.
Yeah, that's pretty.
Did I send that to you?
Yeah, you did.
Yeah. Okay.
And then I put it on Twitter.
I want someone to get that job. I don't even know who it might be, but that's a really awesome opportunity.
Yeah.
That doesn't come up that often. I sent that all to anyone I possibly knew.
And then once you have a job, my thing that I would say once you've been in a job is once a year. So I've been in my job for forever now. And I love my job and I don't intend on leaving it anytime soon because I'm really happy where I'm at. But I still once a year look at my resume and update it. Just because if I don't, because every year when I go, oh yeah, that's right, I did that. If I don't, that I might forget to include some accomplishments because they just become part of the background noise in your own head. So keep it current, keep it updated. And and then I've had to use it for like some volunteer positions or something. They need a resume. Oh, here's my current resume. It's done.
Yeah, I do that a lot.
Well, you have a CV.
Multiple times. Yeah. So, I wish I had a person for that.
An editor?
Yes.
Just do it. I'm sure you could pay someone to do it.
Oh my God. Because that gets unruly.
Yeah. CVs are crazy. Favorite thing?
My favorite thing is my hydro flask. And that sounds like it's a flask, like an alcoholic flask, which it's not. It's a water bottle that keeps beverages hot and cold for 24 hours, but it's thinner than a Nalgene, so it can hold it. It's really nice in your hand. I got it from Shire as a birthday present last year. I love that water bottle so much. They're kind of expensive. They're about $30, but they're awesome.
Nice.
Yeah, it's aluminum.
Okay.
That makes sense, right?
Yeah.
Okay.
Sure.
So it's environmentally friendly and
nice.
It looks sleek.
Does it get hot on your hand?
No, it doesn't get hot on your hand if you have a hot beverage in there, or if I put a smoothie in there, it doesn't get cold on your hand.
Nice. Very cool.
It's awesome.
Mine is going to be a podcast app called Overcast, which I used to use Downcast forever, and it was a ham thing because Downcast is one of the best alternatives to Apple Podcasts are terrible. That is not a good app. So I used Downcast forever and ever and ever, and then I kept hearing about Overcast. I was like, well, I'll try it and see what it's like. And I love it because it pulls in all my episodes. It has an Apple Watch app so that my player is on my wrist. So if I'm listening to a podcast while I'm doing dishes and I need to pause, I can just open up my watch and pause it right there, or go forward 30 seconds or back 30 seconds. I can adjust the volume, I think.
Oh, I use the Apple one, I think, and I can do that.
The Apple one has historically it's been pretty terrible.
I don't like it. I didn't know you could even do other options.
Oh yeah, Overcast. There you go.
I'm gonna get it.
You have to get it. And the other thing is that it also, when you set up an account, which is free, like it's just your email, it syncs to my computer. So I have an Overcast window on my computer, And like, so today we went for a walk this morning. I listened to a podcast on the way over, and then I put my headphones away when we went walking, and I listened to more on the way back, and I still wasn't done until like 10 minutes left. So when I got to work, it picked up, I opened up my computer, and it's right where I left off. There's 10 minutes left, and I played and finished the rest of my computer, and I love it. Overcast. There's a premium version, which I don't pay for. I just have the regular one, but I love it. Overcast.
Those headphones you had on this morning were serious. Are those your wireless?
Those are like $20
They're
wireless
so big.
earbuds. What?
They're pretty big.
Oh yeah. Well, I have weird ears. Like like the AirPods and stuff that people have for iPhone.
Yeah.
They don't interest me because I have never, the earbuds and earpods and all that stuff that come with the iPhone have never fit in my ear.
No, they don't fit in mine either.
I don't know whose ear they're obviously molded on, like some white man in a suit's ears. Like, oh,
no,
these
James
will fit
doesn't like
everyone.
them either.
Oh, they're terrible.
Yeah.
So the AirPods are like a neat idea, but I'm like, none of your products fit in my ears. Why would this $300 pair of wireless earbuds fit in my ears? But no, yeah, they're kind of big, but I like them to be, if I don't stick them all the way in, I can still hear ambient noise. And I like that especially when I'm walking by myself, so that I can be aware of my surroundings.
Nice.
Not as big as my other ones.
The ones you have on right now?
Kind of, yeah. These ones are big. Anyway.
All right. Awesome.
Well,
So good luck to everyone on a job search.
yes.
It's stressful, but also can be worth it in the end.
And every interview is a practice interview. Like, don't
Yeah.
turn down a job that you haven't been offered yet. So what that means is apply even if you think you won't get it. Don't turn it down before you've been rejected already. Just apply. And the other one is that if you go and you feel like you bombed it, that's like your throwaway interview. You practiced, you had an idea in your thank you note. You can just say thank you so much for meeting you, and or that's a great time too if you completely blank on a question. I realized when you asked me about XYZ that I didn't really have a good answer, and in hindsight what I wish I would have said is blah blah blah. Correct any answers that you had to then. So anyway, we have some awesome guests coming up in the next few weeks, and I am so excited about that. But in the meantime, Kelley's going to Jamaica.
Yes, I am.
So she's going to tell me how it is.
Oh, it's going to be amazing, I hope. Because I am optimistic, but then I thought, I have this vision of Jamaica being the most amazing thing I've ever done. So I had to kind of talk myself down a little bit. Like, okay, what if it wasn't the most amazing thing you've ever done? So I thought, okay, well, it could rain every day, which would be a bummer. But then I still decided that wouldn't be that bad.
But you're going to this is to celebrate your 10th anniversary.
Right.
You're going kid free. You get to have a whole 10 days
Silence.
of silence with your husband. And even if it rains there, like what I've read, and I can show you the weather reports, like it'll say rain, but it rains for 5 minutes and then it's done. So
That's what I've heard too. That it looks, the forecast looks like it's thunder and lightning every day, but that's just standard. So
yeah.
We'll
So
see.
you'll have fun.
Yeah.
So until next time.
Bye.
Bye.